Hello and welcome to Push to Be More. My name is Matt Edmundson and I am your host today as we chat with our very special guest about what he has had to do to push through, what sort of fuels his journey called life, what he's looking forward to. We're going to get into all of that with Scott Overbeck from Seacoast Consulting Group. We're going to get into it. And I'm looking forward to this because I've actually had the privilege of doing a podcast with Scott before. So I know this one's going to be good. We've already met. We've already had some chats. So I'm looking forward to getting into his life experiences, the hurdles he's had to push through, the way he recharges his batteries, and of course, what steps he's taking to be more. Now, don't forget, you can find all of the detailed show notes and a complete transcript of our conversation over at pushtobemore.com. And whilst you're there, if you haven't done so already, why not sign up to the newsletter and we'll send all of the insights, the links, the goodies. They go direct to your inbox totally for free, which is super cool. And of course, you can always scroll down on your podcast app. Let's just be real. The show notes are also there with all the links as well. So you can do that. But it'd be great to see you on the website. Great to get you on the email list so we can just send those out to you as well. So come see us at pushtobemore.com. Now, this episode is proudly powered. I love that phrase. It is proudly powered by PodJunction, the company that helps you build your business with podcasting. It is the magic behind the scenes that let entrepreneurs and business leaders like you and me amplify our voices by hosting our own podcast, which I have to be honest, it's been an extraordinary marketing tool for me and all the companies that I seem to be involved with. Podcasting is one of those things that it caught me sideways. I'm not going to lie, it caught me sideways when I first started doing it. And within a few weeks, I started to see the power of podcasting and what it can actually do. But I get it. You might be a bit daunted by the tech. You might not fully understand what's involved, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where PodJunction is going to be a great company to get involved with. Sadaf heads up PodJunction. She, in fact, is a producer of this show, and she is wonderful. So I'm sure she would love to talk to you, but go check out PodJunction at podjunction.com. And actually, if you are on a podcast, what's the word? Podcast browser? A podcast player, I think is the right phrase, like Apple Podcast or Spotify. Just go and search out the PodJunction podcast where Sadaf and I talk about podcasting a whole bunch. Yes, we do. You can check that out as well. But go check them out, podjunction.com. Now, that's enough about that. Let's talk about Scott, shall we? Scott has turbocharged businesses across 4 continents, almost as many continents as are continents that are on a risk board. That wasn't difficult to say in any way, shape, or form. So he's boosted businesses across all of these, boosting growth, revenue, and efficiency. And after learning the secrets of the world's biggest companies, he's now sharing the magic with small to medium-sized businesses as well. So you're ready for success? Well, Scott's got the playbook, that's for sure. So Scott, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you on again. Great to be chatting
Matt.
with you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
No problem. Always fun. If you're listening again, I don't remember listening to Scott before on a podcast, Matt. It's on the e-commerce podcast where we talk about all things e-commerce. So go check that out. Enjoyed the conversation so much, we thought, let's get Scott on to Push as well. So here we are. Now, Scott, let's start off the Push podcast with the usual question I like to open up this particular podcast with, which you reminded me of, actually, before we hit the record button, which was a beautiful thing. If you could have your own podcast and you could have a guest on the show from your past, from your present, the only caveat being they've had to have had a big influence on your life, a big impact on your life, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I love that question. I put a little thought into it, and I'm going to go with Steve Jobs.
Okay.
So obviously not
Apple fame.
living, but somebody who's had a huge impact on my life. His rise happened during my childhood. I remember very well. I was quite young, sitting in front of this ginormous Apple computer, and just thinking this is like the coolest thing ever. That was really kind of the start of my path, my journey toward computers and what that meant, and little did I know how computers were going to evolve over in my lifetime. But really, in my lifetime up to this point, I've seen his rise, I've seen his fall, I've seen the resurgence um, of of his involvement
Mm,
with with the iPod and the iPad and on and on. And when I think about what has happened just in my lifetime with computers and how I'm sitting in my home office and I can communicate with people all over the planet, which I do pretty
mm.
much on a daily basis, um, it's truly astounding.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I take it you're a Mac man.
I am not a Mac man. Well, I'm a Mac man in the sense I have an iPad and an iPhone sitting right in front of me, but I've never made the switch. I'm very institutionalized. I spent 30 years in corporate. I think if I went
Yeah.
down a more of an artistic, creative path, I would absolutely be full on Mac man. I'm kind of balancing between the two.
It's a fair comment, actually. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier on, and they're buying a new computer, and they were specking up a new PC, and he was telling me about it, and it was all very exciting for him. But I said, well, why don't you get a Mac, man? It's just, I don't understand why you're getting this PC stuff. Because I'm very much Mac. I mean, I have got the
I'm sure.
iPhone, the iPad, the Mac. I'm, recording on a Mac at the moment. Most of the staff at the company are Macs, and this is why I've not got any kidneys left because I've had to sell them to buy the Macs. But but we are all in the Mac
Priorities.
ecosystem. Yeah, 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 yeah. I got sucked in 2012, and that was 2010, I think it was. I bought my first Mac, and up until then, I would just ridicule people who had Macs. Um, and here I am, a definitive Mac evangelist
There's
in
still a
2024.
chance for me. There's
There
still
is,
time.
there is. The trouble is, once you start, you don't go back, I think. And whenever I sit in front of a PC now, I am just, because it's been 14 years, I'm totally lost. I just genuinely am lost. I don't know what to do. I can't get my head around Android phones. I'm like you. I'm too institutionalized, maybe the wrong way, is the phrase. So I'm curious, Steve Jobs. I mean, Steve Jobs, obviously, he's had a big impact on the world. There's no doubt about it. Um, an interesting character. In some respects, he was inspirational. In some respects, you wouldn't want his life. I find him quite an interesting chap. Just the way he did presentations when he presented the iPhone, when he presented the iPad, and it's sort of, he revolutionized, I think, how people announce products to the world and all that sort of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so you can definitely see the impact, and certainly from a tech point of view, he's had an impact on my life. But I'm curious, in what is there a specific way he's had? I'm curious why he was the first person that sprung to your mind.
Yeah, he was a person that came to my mind. I think just because I spent all day every day on a computer
Hmm.
and really I think that he set that in motion in
Mm,
large part. Now granted, it's not a Mac that I'm working on, but just the idea and being able to kind of be such a visionary and lay out kind of the path for what the future was gonna look like. I think he
mm,
was able to articulate that better than anybody else.
yeah.
And of course, we all know that Apple kinda kept, their sphere very tight, right? That
Mm,
was really the difference of why kind of, Windows-based products really took off because
mm,
they let them out the door and let people tinker with them and plug and play and more open sourcing and things like that. Apple didn't do that, right? So they went down a different path. It took them a little longer.
mm,
But when you talk about somebody who has created a product that people are like absolute fanatics over,
yeah.
he's the guy.
Yeah, he is totally. Have you tried? Have you been into an Apple shop and tried the Vision Pro?
Have not. Have not.
So here's some. Even though you've not got a Mac computer, here's something that I would recommend, and I'd actually recommend it to anybody who's listening, even if you're not a Mac fan. Go to the Apple store nearest you and make an appointment because you have to. I think it works on an appointment-based system. you want an appointment. It takes about 45 minutes from memory, 45 minutes to an hour to try the Vision Pro. So when I was in the States, because it's only just come out in the UK the last month or so, but when I was in the States earlier this year, I went to the Apple store, tried the Vision Pro. My son was over with me actually, and he tried it as well. And you will get to see, I think, where computing is going. I definitely don't think the Vision Pro is there because I can tell you, all the things that are wrong with it.
Mm,
But I was utterly amazed and blown away by what that thing can do. Um,
wow.
and you can see the technological limitations that it has right now. But it's like the first iPhone, and you compare the first iPhone to the iPhone 15, which we're on now,
Mhm.
chalk and cheese, right? So you can see where it's going. I just think it's one of those things that's just worth spending 45 minutes doing, if I'm honest with you. Um,
Appreciate it. Yeah, I'll look that up as soon as we wrap up today, Matt.
yeah, do it,
Sounds
man.
great.
Just go to the Apple store and try it and just, yeah, it is extraordinary. But Scott, I mean, I mentioned earlier that, you're part of Seacoast, but tell us a little bit about the company. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so basically, I left corporate last year to stand up a consulting company, really taking everything that I've learned over my corporate career and applying it more toward small to medium-sized businesses. Our kind of secret sauce is around strategic alliances
Yeah.
and really, identifying what a particular business's strengths and also their weaknesses are, and then trying to come up with ways to pair or partner them up with other businesses um, so that we see some synergies.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have a particular weakness, and many of the clients that I work with, Matt, are their weakness is they want they want greater distribution, they want more sales, they want more business. Right. It's pretty standard. How do we go about doing that? So we'll take a look and we'll say, well, what business or businesses out there have spent tons and tons of money to acquire your ideal avatar, your ideal
Yeah.
client or customer? Once we've identified that, then it's a matter of figuring out what's a win-win for both of them, because in most cases there is a win-win.
Yeah.
And for every competitor that a business has, there's probably 10 other businesses that could be complementary and where you could work together and everybody benefits.
Yeah. I remember this conversation super well because I remember the different conversations we had about going and getting, we were talking about, I'm trying to think of the example, Scott, where was it a crisp company? We call them crisps. You call them potato chips, don't you? Where
Sure.
they had stuff printed on the packet. Like 150 million people all of a sudden started to see the designs and things like that. This is what you specialize in doing. Is so I go to the supermarket. I'll see a potato chips company advertising, I don't know, the latest Disney movie or that type of thing. It's that kind of conversation that we started to have, but from an e-commerce point of view, which I found absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways. When you talk about strategic alliances, it's just like, okay, I'm going to partner you up with some other company. Well, what's that look like? There's
Mm,
so many different variations of it. I mean, it can literally just be, okay, I'm going to partner you up, and this company is going to email all their clients whatever you're offering. Right? That's one way. Another way is more of like a deeper kind of a software integration, right? Where we're going to kind of put you into another software package, either deeply embedded, or it's going to be an upsell or a downsell, that type of thing. We can get into white labeling and
mm,
licensing. You, I try not to kind of pigeonhole myself and just say, oh, I'm only going to do this, right? At the end of the day, it's every business has a strength or multiple strengths. Every business has a weakness or more than one weakness.
mm,
How can we address those? How can we play to the strengths and how can we address the weaknesses? And if
yeah.
we can get answers to that, there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I love how you do it. And this is what you spent many years in corporate doing, right?
Yeah, in varying roundabout ways. When I stepped back and I just said, okay, so in the totality of my career, what kind of things did I really focus on? Because I've had a lot of different titles, I've done a lot of different things. It was about revenue generation, it was about optimizing, right? And I worked with some of the biggest businesses on the planet, consulted, was employed by them, all different types of things.
Mm.
A lot of the things that these really big companies do and do well, particularly strategic alliances, right? I'll just keep beating that drum until you tell me to stop. But the big businesses do it really, really well. Small to medium-sized businesses and be like, "Oh, yeah, I've heard of it. I've tried it. Didn't work, whatever," but they don't do it very well. They're
Yeah.
really missing the mark because they would rather spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars chasing after clients or customers when they're all sitting over there at another business just waiting to be marketed to.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things which when you listen to it, in my mind, Scott, my default is right. We need to grow the business. Let's do the usual new client acquisition strategies, whatever they are for your business, whatever they are for your industry, cold outreach, paid media, whatever.
Sure.
Um, that's the default thinking, and it's competitive and it is not easy. Whereas what you're doing sounds remarkably simple and straightforward, but we somehow seem to forget about it in the sense that, well, I need these kind of customers. That company over there has got a whole bunch of those customers. So how can I create something between me and that company, which is a win-win where we get access to those customers? Um,
Yeah.
and
We go to our
it's
default
straightforward,
settings
but we
so
don't do it.
easily. Yeah, we go to our
Mm,
default setting, which is I need more customers. Well, everybody needs more customers. The question is, how are you going to go about getting them? Right. So you got most businesses that are going to spend 80 to 90% of their time trying to acquire new customers. Um, and they're not cheap, right? And they're getting more
yeah.
expensive all the time. Uh, when I think about the fact that it can be up to 25 times more cost effective selling to your existing customers, that's where we
Hmm.
create opportunities of just saying, okay, so let's say that you have good relationship with your clients. Now, what else can we do to monetize them? Because you might
Mm,
say, oh, well, they've already bought my widget, so we're done with them, right? We're just gonna kinda keep them happy and maybe if there's
yeah.
upgrades or something like that, but it's like, well, is there anything else kind of along that path that they could be interested in? The answer is always yes. Then
Yeah.
it's like, well, why aren't we introducing those types of products or services to them? Because we know they're gonna go buy it somewhere else. Why wouldn't you wanna monetize that? You already have done the hard work. You've done the heavy lifting. You have this customer or client as captive. Let's keep them happy. Let's monetize them.
Mm,
It's so
yeah.
simple, but yet so few companies actually do it.
Yeah, and which means there's opportunity there.
Tremendous opportunity.
Yeah.
My biggest struggle, when I did the switch from big corporate to small to medium sized businesses, let's call 'em SMBs going forward, I figured that it was just gonna be like a slam dunk and be like, "Is that what I'm gonna do?" They'd be like, "Oh, yeah." It's like, there's so much pushback because it's like a huge educational piece.
Mm,
People don't get it. Maybe conceptually they do, but when it comes down to, okay, how's that apply to my business? It's just like,
mm.
it's a really tough thing for people to kind of get their head around.
Which is it's surprising. I suppose because you do see it all the time, literally everywhere. You see this sort of companies promoting other companies,
Yeah.
and you do see it, and yet it does feel so alien. And I don't know why. It's an interesting one. Whether we've just relegated it to being a sort of the privy of the large corporates. Um, is an interesting idea, and I'd not really thought about that.
I wonder if, people look at it and just say, oh, well, it works for big corporate, so it couldn't possibly work for me. Well, why couldn't it? All big
Mm,
corporate it's a scaled up small to medium sized business. And
mm,
it didn't just become ginormous overnight, right? It was an evolution.
Mm.
There's one thing I have on my website, which is that once you understand the immense power of strategic alliances, you will never look at business the same way again. Everywhere you look, you'll see kind of the results of that partnering, that pairing.
Mm.
Some of it's really obvious. Like if you walk into McDonald's or Target or someplace like that, some it's not so obvious, but it's happening everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very true. Very true. So in your, let's jump into it. And we call the show "Push to Be More." We like to ask people where they've had to push through challenges they've had to deal with and face. Um, Obviously, you've we could talk about the challenges of educating clients into understanding the opportunity that's available to them. But that aside, I suppose, what about you? What sort of challenges? Where have you had to push through in life?
Yeah, so I think a few of them that come to mind, I'll just toss a few out, was, the work-life balance, right?
Yeah.
How do you keep things from just being so out of kilter?
Yeah.
And that's clearly an area where somebody like a Steve Jobs, I can say, hey, he's really compelling, he's very interesting. He had like the worst work-life balance ever.
Yeah.
All right. So he was phenomenal in one area of his life. And I wouldn't go so far as to say a failure, but not nearly as phenomenal in other parts of his
Mm.
life. So,
Mm.
so work-life balance is huge. I think, making a jump from kind of largely being institutionalized from an employment perspective in big corporate to transitioning into entrepreneurship is
Yeah.
certainly another challenge that people might run into.
So how did you, I mean, Steve Jobs is a great example, isn't it? I often get asked, what's your, what's your definition of success, or what does success look like for you? And I often reply to that without really thinking about it, as sort of an off the cuff comment, which is I want to succeed at home first.
Mm,
Um, Now I've been married to my beautiful wife for, our next anniversary is 27. So 27 years, coming up for 27 years, three kids, all who,
congratulations.
oh, thank you. I mean, and the kids are awesome, and we all get on super well. I think we're a good family, a good family unit. My son's delight in making fun of me and my age seems to be the phase of life we're at now, which is quite funny. But yeah, I think it's always been my aim to succeed at home first. And I look at someone like Steve Jobs and I go, massive success. I don't see that success at home. Um, and you're right in terms of this work-life balance. How has that played out for you? How have you had to sort of face that challenge?
Yeah, well, what I would say, if we're just talking in the short term, not great because, spinning up a business from scratch is a
Mm.
very time intensive effort. Um, time intensive in okay, so I'm not 20 anymore, so I'm not going to be working 20 hours a day.
Mm.
But the time that, my waking hours, a lot more of it went toward the business than toward, other kind of buckets, we'll call them,
Mhm.
that ideally I would have wanted to focus on. So I think in the short term, if you're going to go down a path of spinning something up, like there is an investment of
Mm.
time and effort.
Mm.
Um, I'm banking on the fact that that's gonna wane very soon, and we're gonna go back to, more of a balanced,
Mm.
approach to life. Because this certainly isn't something that I would want to, you know, it's not the normal that I want. That
Yeah.
being said, over, I would say, probably the last 20 years, I mean, I've kinda taken it upon myself to do kind of deep dives into different ways to be able to, kind of plan your life and, um, be more organized
Mm.
and be more efficient. And I've sort of kind of calibrated that, improved upon that over the last probably 2 decades. I think that has positioned me well where that, yes, while I'm really focused on other things, the more important stuff doesn't suffer as much as it would have. It's not like
Mhm.
I've completely turned off.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, "Oh, I'm thinking of starting a business." And I was curious as to why they wanted to start a company up. And they wanted to, what was the phrase they used? In essence, what they were saying is they wanted to take control of their time. They wanted to get time back
Mm,
because the idea, I mean, they were in corporate and the idea in their head was they see people who run their own companies, like me, I suppose. I don't suppose I help the stereotype in some respect. I take 6 weeks off over summer, and I enjoy that sabbatical time. I've done it for the last 3 years. I have a great team that allows me to do that. And so he was very much, well, I said, "Well, I want to do that. So I'm going to start my own company." And I'm a bit like, not quite sure you understand what you're actually saying.
yeah. Hmm.
This is going
It's
to
true.
suck the life out of you, right?
Yeah.
In the early days, it's going to take an awful lot. I've always found, Scott, with these kind of things, that there are seasons.
Mm,
And this is something that my wife and I understand. I will say to my wife, I am in a season of busyness, as in for the
mm,
next however long that season's going to be. And if you're starting up a company, it's going to be 18 months. If you're where I am, it might be 3 months, whatever bit I'm in. But for the next 3 months, life is just going to be a bit busy and it's going to look like this. I'm not going to have these evenings and so on and so forth. Are we okay with that? And getting, the agreement on that, because the season has to have an end date. And I think it's important to have that conversation, but I think it's important to understand that things do come and go in seasons, right?
yeah, I love that. I had actually done a presentation for a men's breakfast a while back, and I really talked about the different seasons of life. These were more longer term, like you're just newly married, you're in the kid mode, the baby mode, the preteen, the teen, right?
Mm,
So the different seasons pass, and how complicated it can be to kind of pair up with somebody else when they're in different seasons.
mm,
So you because I used to think all simply like, oh well, if we're married and I've been married like 20, a little over 20 years, two
oh,
kids.
congrats.
Thank you. So if we're married and have kids and somebody else is married and have kids, it's like a great pairing. We can bond and we can share those. And it's actually like once you get into it, you realize that it's not that simplistic
Mm,
because of the seasonality of it. Like people are in different places. Some people are
yeah.
like frantic busy, some people are more settling in.
Mm,
But it's there's a nuance there that matters. Um,
yeah, I agree. I like that. There is very much a nuance and recognizing that life is going to go in seasons. It's not consistent. Um, I'm a big
yeah.
fan of the big rock theory. Where
Mhm.
you put the big rocks in the container, then the medium sized rocks,
100%.
and you do that. And so always putting in the diary what's important. So I try and work out 6 days a week. I make sure Sharon and I we have at least one date night a week. That I'm usually around 9 times out of 10 for our evening meal, and we put those things in the diary. The sort of the big rocks, I and then the rest of it sort of happens around that, really. With the different requirements. And I can't always work out if I'm traveling, but I can go to a hotel maybe that's got a gym. There's things that you can do to help yourself. But it is
Yeah,
intentionality, isn't it?
it is, and I love the big rock idea. Like, I'm a huge planner. I try to sit down and plan, a week ahead, so usually on a Friday or
Hmm.
Saturday morning, I'll, try to be in peace and just look at where I've been, what's upcoming. But
Mm,
yeah, looking at those big rocks and planning around them is huge, right? So those are commitments that either you made to others or you made to yourself,
mm,
and either one is equally important. Um, but the intentionality, to your point, is that something that's important enough needs to be on your calendar,
mm,
right? If it's on your mind, if it's important to you or to somebody that you care about, it needs to be in there.
mm,
You need to create that rock, right? You need to put it in there and be like, I
mhm.
have to navigate around the rock. Um, because if you don't do it, in my mind, it's not important. And
Mm.
it's probably going to be kicked to the side.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. And I've found that actually, even simple things like we've had date night every week for pretty much 26 years, unless I've been traveling.
That's
20.
fantastic.
Um, it's still in my, I've been doing it for 26 years and it's still in my diary, right? Because I, I know that the first week that it's not can easily become the second week that it's not. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Whereas if I just don't let that happen, it I seem to have a much better success rate with the whole thing, and it's interesting. How do you have routines? Have you figured out routines, or is it all just craziness all the time?
Yeah, it definitely has routines. Let me just go back to something that you said, Matt, real quick. Is that the idea of if as soon as you take it out of your diary or stop making it intentional, you're now starting to create a new habit.
Mm,
And the new habit is not necessarily a good one. So the new habit, they say it takes X amount of times before something becomes a habit. Well, as soon as you stop doing something, you are in the process of building up toward creating a new habit, which is, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to
yeah.
do this. Whether it's working out, whether it's having an intentional date night, whatever it ends up being. Um, but to answer your question, the last one, yes, I mean, I'm very intentional with my calendar, probably um, overly so, just because of the fact that I have so much going on right
Hmm.
now, and I need to almost be militant about my time.
Mm,
And I'll tell you, I mean, I've known for for 30 years, I mean, people have been saying that time is the most valuable thing that you can have. It's more valuable than money. It's more valuable than gold and silver. And I mean, I've known that. I've sort of quasi believed it, but until I became an entrepreneur, I'm living it now. Like, it,
yeah.
the value of that time. And when you become an entrepreneur, you get to choose in almost every case is how you're going to spend that time, that minute, that 30-minute,
Yeah.
that hour, that day, that week, that month. You get to choose. Are you going to choose right? Are you going to choose wrong? Are you just going to, surf, looking at news or
Yeah.
scroll through Facebook reels because it's overwhelming
Mm.
making the choice. Nobody's going to tell you what to do. So
That's a
in
really
my
interesting
opinion,
point.
you
Yeah.
have to be very intentional.
Really interesting point about being so overwhelmed you can't make the decision, um, which is something I think when you're tired and I found actually, if I'm tired and I've made a lot of decisions, I get decision fatigue. And the, at the end of the day, because there is so much choice now on what you can do with your time, um, that actually making a decision becomes quite complicated, doesn't it? And complicated. You almost sort of go to, right, I'm just going to doom scroll through Instagram because I don't have to make that decision. I'm just going to start doing it and I don't have to think about doing it. And and I find the more tired I get, the more difficult it is to make a choice. Do you know what I mean? So this sort of the overwhelm through tiredness and because of the sheer quantity of choices that we're faced with, I think decision fatigue is a real problem.
It really is, and I think that to a certain extent, I mean, we're still in the process of adapting from, say, like the idea that you would go to work and you would work on an assembly line and you would do the same exact thing,
Mm,
however many times in a day, then you would clock out and then you would leave. Like, now we have so much more autonomy and we can invoke creativity and there's individuality that gets moved into that, and you don't have somebody telling you what to do.
mm,
So maybe there's a certain outcome that needs to happen, but you get to figure out over time what that looks like, and that can
mm,
create. I mean, for some people, they're well adapted to that, but some really need to kind of be told what to do. So if somebody's not going to tell you what to do, then you sort of kind of need to be the person who's like, here's what to do. Right? Whether that's doing like
Yeah.
what I do is sitting down on a week at a time and saying, okay, what are my big priorities for this coming week? And
Mm,
if on a given day it doesn't align back to that, then, I need to really check myself and say,
mm,
well, are those priorities really as important as I thought they were? Or am I
mm.
just trying to distract myself? Because, sometimes getting into this stuff is pretty heady.
Yeah, yeah, very much the distraction thing. I can totally empathize with that. You're just like, yep, I'm just going to do this over here. It's interesting. I was chatting with somebody earlier on today, and we were two very different backgrounds, working two very different environments, and there's some cross work going on between the two parties. And I had a meeting with them about 6 weeks ago where we agreed something would happen, just something quite simple. And I said to them today, "Has that happened yet?" And they're like, "Oh no, we're just waiting on agreeing that formally with such and such a person, and then I've got to go and get this person involved, and then this company is going to go and get me a quote." And I'm like, "We're 6 weeks into something, and so there's going to be another 6 weeks before that happens." And I saw this and I thought this is interesting because that really wound me up, right? And I remember sitting there thinking, "What is going on?" And the same conversation I'm having with that group of people, we're like, right, let's meet next Tuesday or whenever it was, and we're going to go through one or two things. And I think we need this other person there. And so they're like, well, I'll call that person. And I said, right, and I called them right there and then and said, right, this is what we're doing. Are you coming yet? Get it all sorted out within inside literally 45 seconds. I picked up the phone, made the call, it was done.
Yeah.
Um, and it just struck me, Scott, this morning. I don't know if you found this actually, because you've been running your own company now. Do you find the way you deal with time is different? Because I would look at that and go, there's the entrepreneur. He hustles, he gets things done. The business leader is used to leading his team versus somebody, doesn't really matter what they do. They're in a big system and it just sort of flows along and they'll get to it when they get to it. You've come from one environment to another. And I'm kind of curious, has that impacted you in your ability to make decisions and deal with time?
Yeah. I what I will tell you is, toward the maybe the last 5 years of my time at corporate, we adopted an um, kind of uh,
Hmm.
agile methodology where we would do daily stand-ups and we would have kind of the scrum board
Yeah.
that really speaks to kind of what you're talking about. Like if you
Mm,
take a look at something in a bigger picture and you say, oh, well, that's difficult. I don't really know how to get started.
mm,
So I'll just come back to it later. Like I'm gonna somehow figure it out without, spending any time thinking about it. Um, and that's where one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year goes by, and you're like, well, I haven't even tackled it because I haven't broken it down into anything action, right? What kind of Agile allowed us to do was identify the priorities, chunk them down into something
yeah.
that was actionable. Because once it's actionable, then it's like, hey, Matt, did you call that guy that you said you were going to call? They're like, no. Well, why not? What's going on?
Mm,
How long's, and by the way, we've already determined kind of based upon story points or level of effort how much time that's gonna take. Well,
mm,
come on, Matt, that takes us in 5 minutes. What's the deal? Oh, I had something else to do. Oh, really? What did you have to do? Because
mm,
it's not on the board, right? This is your priority.
mm.
So that really helped. I've been following a methodology by, David Allen for,
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know.
GTD.
Yeah, maybe a decade getting things
Mm,
done, and, two major things that always resonate with me is, like, if you have something on your list to do, if it's not chunked down to an actionable item, then you haven't done your homework enough,
mm,
right? So if I look at my list and it's like, it says groceries, what does that mean?
mm.
Pick up groceries, order groceries, put
Yeah,
groceries away, like,
yeah,
it's not chunked down enough. And then the other thing I'll just toss out is, he talks about making sure that, anything that is in your head and is taking your attention, gets put down
Hmm.
because our mind isn't meant for kind of ruminating
Yeah.
on thoughts all the time. So those two things um, really kind of synced up nicely with my agile experience in corporate, and I
Hmm.
think was a really great handoff for the entrepreneurial route.
Brilliant. I like you. That was one of the overriding lessons I remember from the Dave Allen getting things done stuff was if it's in your head, get it down because you're going to forget about it. And this is
Yeah.
where going back to our early conversation, Scott, about Apple.
Mm.
I have the Apple Watch, and I just love pretending I'm Michael Knight from Knight Rider. And as soon as it's in my head, I'm talking to my watch,
I
like,
loved that show. Oh my goodness.
and it's great. I've got it in to my reminders, and it just works super well. So I'm a big fan of that.
Good for you.
Scott, listen, it's a fascinating conversation, but absolutely fascinating conversation, and I love the whole concept of productivity and getting things done, and how well we do them, and what sort of things I can do with my time to sort of better utilize it. How do you've been doing this, like 18 months. How do you recharge your batteries? What do you do to sort of stay on top of your own game?
Yeah. One thing that I really decided to focus on when I went into the entrepreneurial route is getting enough quality sleep. I found that I was cheating myself, my body, my family
Mm,
for a long time. There were times that I would get up at like when I'd go into the office, which was fairly rare, but I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning to try
wow.
to beat rush hour traffic. And then when I come home, how great do you think I was when I came back after, working all day and
Yeah.
commuting for 2.5 hours? And, like I was toast. I had nothing in the tank. Um, so sleeping has been a huge thing. I also made the decision to stop drinking at all, right? Because
Mm,
I was like, well, I want to be able to kind of micromanage, how my performance is. I don't want to invoke any other variables in there. So I got rid of drinking, focus on my sleep. I
mm,
track everything I eat.
mm.
Um, it's almost like a mathematical formula that I'm doing now. So really just focusing on the things that I know that are gonna have an impact,
Mm.
sleep being a huge one.
Well, a massive one. Yeah, yeah.
Massive, massive.
And actually, by cutting out the alcohol, you instantly make your sleep better, don't you?
That
Because
that is that is for
it,
sure.
there's a
That is
definite
for
link.
sure.
I know people say, "Well, I have to drink alcohol to get to sleep." It's like, yeah, but alcohol gets you to sleep quicker, but it the
Yeah.
quality of sleep is not as good and it's not as deep, so you wake up tend to during the night.
Yeah, it's
Um,
so true. Everything they say about alcohol is a great excuse if you're drinking it. When you're not drinking it, you're like, "Man, why didn't I stop sooner? I
yeah,
sleep better, I feel better."
yeah, yeah. It's I I can't say as I'm teetotal, but I definitely have maybe one or two drinks a week. But I never have more than one at a time, and I never drink past
Yeah,
a certain time of an evening. Um,
that's good. That's
and
good.
it seems to have worked well. But how, in terms of sleep, what is it? Just a case of you've got more sleep, or have you done this? These one of these sort of latest trends where you've bought a mattress that can control temperature and all kinds of crazy stuff.
I haven't, gone that far yet, although I'm open to the idea, and I think they
Mm,
also have these, like, charging mattresses or something
hmm.
that I saw, so I'm like, "Oh, I'm kinda interested in that." I just, am focused on getting enough sleep, right?
Hmm.
So I'm kind of in the 8.5 hour realm.
Right.
Um Understanding your REM cycles, I mean, there's some free apps that you can
Hmm.
or websites that you can go to find out, like, if I fall asleep at 11 o'clock and I wake up at this time, am I gonna be in the middle of a REM cycle or not?
Hmm.
Because, there's a lot of science that says that if you wake up, and you're not completed with the cycle,
Yeah.
you're gonna wake up and you're gonna feel groggy. And if
Hmm.
and if you would wake up 20 minutes later, you're gonna feel on top of the world. So
Hmm.
so I think understanding and playing around with that is kind of fun.
That's really interesting. I if I think back over the last 5 years of my life. and I'm in my early 50s now. So, but the last 5, 6 years of my life, I made a decision not to have an alarm clock in the morning. Um, and that I just wanted to wake up naturally. And when I woke up, I also made the decision that I would get up. I wouldn't just sort of snooze around in bed. And what I've found is that I will wake up pretty much at the same time every day. Like just a little before 7 a.m. I am awake. And I'll get up and I'll do my quiet time, and I'll go do the gym and all that sort of stuff. And then I'm good for the day. But it's fascinating how I've not actually needed an alarm clock uh, for a while since I focused on creating that routine. Talking
That's
about the
cool.
power of routines.
That's really cool. It reminded me of, I think it's Mel Robbins, that she does like a 3, 2, 1 blast off kind of thing. So
Yeah.
now some people like, just want to do snooze or whatever. And you
Hmm.
just like, you get in the habit of like, I'm not delaying, right? I'm just going to give myself a wind up of 3, 2, 1.
Mm.
And then I'm just going to get out of bed, whatever the case may be, start something that I'm dreading,
Mm.
and that's pretty powerful. It's very conditional, right? You're really
It
just
is.
conditioning your body
Yeah.
to be like, "Hey, I've got control over this. Why do I need
Mm.
a backup alarm
Mm.
or a snooze alarm? I got this."
I got this. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. We've not got time to talk about it actually, but one of the things that I've found is when I looked at nature, there is a definite sine wave. So you
Absolutely.
have daytime and then you have dusk, where actually the world gets ready for night. And then you have your sleep, and then you have dawn, where the world gets ready for day. And I was living a very binary life. I was like, I'd be doing emails until like 10:30, and I'd be like, all go. And then I'd sit in bed and go, right, let's go to sleep. Boom. And actually, when I lived more according to the science of nature, and I created a nighttime routine, and a morning routine, and actually you need about, nature takes 70 minutes to transition from where it is to being asleep. That's a
Mhm.
really good strategy I found. And it really, really helped me. But yeah,
Yeah,
fascinating.
I love it. I love it. If there's anything that came out of, COVID, this one was like the realization that you don't have to be sending emails at all times of
Yeah.
the day or night. You don't have to appear to be available at all. And in fact, it almost did a 180, which was like, "Why are you sending an email at 3 in the morning? Just stop
What's wrong
it."
with you? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Scott, listen, we've got to that time of the show where I have pulled out the question box.
Uh,
State of the art graphics if you're watching the video. This is where we flick through some questions. Wherever you say stop, that's the place I'm going to stop. And that's the question I'm going to ask you.
stop.
Okay, so the question, let me pull it up here. In what areas are you happy to be good enough?
Hmm. I would say the first thing that jumps to mind, I mean, there's plenty, but first thing that jumps to mind is the areas that would require technical skills. I don't I don't feel like I need to be a master of
Yeah,
everything. I feel like I can, that I'm good enough. I can get help if needed. So I don't remember any HTML.
yeah.
I can't integrate softwares, and that's okay. I'm good enough.
It's really interesting. It's a really good point. Um, I remember years ago listening to an interview with, I can't remember the chap's name. It'll come back to me. And he talked about something called the theory of eights. And
Eights?
yeah, the theory of eights, the number eight. So the
Mhm.
theory of eights. And it was a very simple idea. He said, listen, everybody is trying to hit a 10 out of 10. They want a 10 out of 10 customer experience. They want a 10 out of 10 job. They want a 10 out of 10 vacation. They want a 10 out of 10. Everything's got to be 10 out of 10.
Mhm.
Everything's got to be excellent. My Instagram feed has got to look 10 out of 10. And, you're striving for these things. And this is actually Steve Jobs all over. I mean, the
Yeah.
level of attention he put into detail, certainly into key things, maybe not everything, but certainly some key. He was just like, this guy was like a 12 out of 10. I mean, he just wanted it, crazy spot on. And his whole theory was, you know what, when you live in a realm where you want 10 out of 10 all the time, the pressure is really high. And the disappointment is also really high because when you don't hit the 10 out of 10, you're disappointed. And so he had something called the theory of eights. Is like, I wanted every area to hit an 8. He said, because when we were trying to hit 10 out of 10, we weren't that consistent. Sometimes we'd hit it, sometimes we weren't, sometimes we would. And as a team, it then became very up and down. He said, when our aim was to hit 8 out of 10 across these key areas, and he said, I found that we could do that every single time and every single day, then that's when life became interesting. And so he found consistency at a level 8 was much easier than trying to be a 10 out of 10 junkie all the time. And so that's what that question reminded me of.
I like that. It's kind of like giving yourself permission to lower the bar because you're going to be better off.
and almost permission for it not to be perfect, which is an odd
Right.
thing to say, I think, in the modern day world. Um, but
Yeah.
actually, I, it's okay as long as I'm hitting 8 out of 10. Then I can be. If I hit 10 out of 10, I am laughing. I'm stoked. I'm really happy.
Mhm.
But I'm also really happy when I hit an 8 out of 10, and that creates a level of consistency which is actually much easier to attain. How true
Yeah.
it is or not, I don't know. I just thought it was a really interesting interview that I was
I
listening to
like it.
recently.
I'm gonna actually do a little research on that. I'm not one to to have idols, sports and otherwise. But when you take a look at people in sports and you say, well, the most famous people, like what's their accuracy rate? What's their
Mm,
batting average?
mhm,
How many uh, free three throws did they get? Last season.
mm,
Like it's not perfect.
no,
How many songs did were number one that
mhm,
somebody wrote? Not a lot, right? So so I think that we have a tendency to hold ourselves to a higher standard
yeah, that's
than
such
we
a
need
good
to.
point. Yeah,
Yeah.
such a good point. It's that thinking, isn't it, that actually that that drives this perfectionism, which causes us to do crazy things. Um, like I don't know how old your kids are, but I have a daughter. She's a teenager. Um, and when she was younger, I was aware that she was seeing 3,000 images a day through various different channels because that's what kids would see
Mhm.
through social media, TV, all the different things. And I was aware that the majority of the images that she saw of women were not real because they had been photoshopped in some way or filtered in some way
Mhm.
to take it from a whatever they perceived it to be. It needed it to be a 10 out of 10, right?
Right.
They always had to have this 10 out of 10. And I think it's given rise to an anxiety in kids, which is scary. I mean, we've got the
Yeah.
most anxious kids we've ever had, and I'm not saying that's the sole cause of it, but I think it's probably added to it.
Yeah.
Um, and just
100%.
having those conversations with my daughter, as because it's heartbreaking. You're just like, I really hope you don't go down this road because 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
It's not always achievable. Listen, Scott, really, really enjoyed this conversation, but I
Me
think I could go
too.
on a lot longer. There's so many questions that I've I've got left to ask you, but I'm also aware of time and want to be respectful of that. So, how do people reach you if they want to connect, maybe with you where work's concerned, or just want to connect and just say, "Hey, listen to you on the show, thought it was great." What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, thank you. So two ways. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. You can look me up, Scott Overbeck. I've got a presence there. My profile's open, so you can connect with me. You can message me. Um, Love to hear from you. Also, my website, seacoastcg.com, Seacoast CG for consulting group, cg.com. You can message me there as well. And there's mechanisms on both platforms for scheduling a 30-minute session with me.
Fantastic. Fantastic. In fact, I linked with you on LinkedIn. I went
Yes,
on
you
LinkedIn
did.
earlier on and I was like, I can't believe we're not connected
I know.
already.
I was thinking that too. Yeah, I'm glad you sent that through. Thank you.
Yeah, so no, we will of course link to Scott's info in the show notes, which, like I say, you can get along for free with the transcript at pushtobemore.com, or they'll be coming direct to your inbox if you sign up to the newsletter, or just simply scroll down on your favorite podcast app and they'll be in the show notes as well. But Scott, listen, thank you so much for coming on, man. Genuinely
Thank
love the
you.
conversation. Super,
Me
it got
too.
my brain going, and I really enjoyed that. So thank you.
Me too. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Well, that's a wrap on another great conversation. Wasn't it great? A massive round of applause for Scott. In fact, I can do this. Hang on. Sorry, Scott. There we go. Yeah. For him.
All right. Love it.
This is what happens when you get a sound desk in your recording studio. Things on. Anyway, huge thanks to today's show sponsor, Podjunction, for all you change makers out there thinking about podcasting and using it as a marketing tool. Definitely would strongly recommend you check it out. Go connect with them. Go find out more about it at podjunction.com. Listen to that podcast as well. I really enjoy that podcast. Now, remember, keep pushing to be more. Don't forget to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts from, because we've got some more seriously compelling conversations up our sleeve, and I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, let me be the first. You are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. Now, Scott has to bear it. I have to bear it. You've got to bear it as well. Now, Push to Be More is brought to life by the fantastic Podjunction. For transcripts or show notes, as I said, swing on by the website Push to Be More. Big kudos to the Podjunction team for making this show possible. But that's it from me. That's it from Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. I'll catch you on the flip side. Until then, keep pushing. Bye for now.